We will now turn our pamphlets over and read from Matthew 28:16-20. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded to you. And remember, I am with you always, to the end of the age. This is God's good news for all of God's people.
Thanks be to God.
Let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord, be in these words and in our hearts that we have gathered here today. Be in this time and use it for your purposes. In your Son's name. Amen. In the late 18th century, John Wesley found himself as a priest in the Church of England. Things weren't going well. London had several gorgeous cathedrals. They were wonderful places. They were large, soaring spaces. The stained glass was gorgeous. The time was absolutely holy when church was called. But there was a problem. They were empty. I mean, certainly there were a few folks there that had come because that was the place to be on Sunday morning. It was the place to be seen and to see others. It was this moment when the well-connected people in the city of London came together and prayed. But the churches were empty. There wasn't the people weren't there. This broke Wesley's heart. He saw that there were so many people that were missing, that were not present, not in that moment, that somehow or another the church had lost our ability to connect with people. Many people in the town of London and all throughout England knew that the churches were there, knew that service was there, knew that it was a wonderful and gorgeous place to be, but didn't feel welcome. Didn't feel like it was the place where they could come. That they would not be welcome, nor would they be able to connect with anything of any real substance there. Nothing that was being offered in that moment connected with what was going on in their lives and where they were hurting and where they were needing. It just wasn't them. And the churches were empty. It certainly wasn't because there weren't people in London. London was a busy place. It certainly wasn't because people didn't hunger and thirst for something a little more and something that helped to explain their lives and something to help them get through their days. That's a need that's been with us ever since the first man drew breath. We've needed that something to help us get through when things were tough and times were hard. The churches were empty. Now, John Wesley grew up in absolutely a Christian household. He grew up as one of a number of brothers and sisters. Two parents, a father who was a priest in the Church of England as well. So he grew up a preacher's kid. He knew exactly what the church was supposed to be like. In fact, he had sort of bought into this idea that church was supposed to be kind of special and really a little bit on the high side. And he went to the finest schools in the area and had the great, best teaching. He knew what high church was because he felt that in his soul. That was something that connected with him. But he looked around and he saw that the churches were empty, and it broke his heart. Now, Wesley was, in his time, bless his heart, he was a little bit of an outcast. He had gotten into sort of a bad habit of preaching. He was labeled with this horrible term. All the upright and upstanding leadership in the Church of England had branded him an enthusiast. That means that when he preached, he got a little excited. And quite frankly, he got kicked out of most of the good pulpits throughout London. They didn't allow him to preach there anymore. So he and a good friend of his, George Whitefield, were commiserating on this, and they wondered about how the church was going and where things were headed at that time. And Whitefield said, "You got to come and see what I'm experiencing, what's happening down in this little coal mining town." Now, Wesley got there on the 1st of April, and he witnessed his friend George Whitefield speaking to about 30,000 coal miners and sharing the good news of Christ. And Wesley got to thinking, that's what we need to be doing as the church. That's what needs to happen. 30,000 coal miners, who quite frankly probably would not have felt welcome in those high steeple churches in London. 30,000 of them turned out to hear George Whitefield, who from what I understand, wasn't that great a preacher to start with, but it was all about the grace that he was able to present and the love of Christ that he was able to show in that moment, and that brought the people out in droves, because there was such a hunger for the grace of Christ. Wesley struggled with this because, quite frankly, that was against everything that his church upbringing told him was right. He knew that the church was supposed to be that special place. He even writes in his journal. I'm going to read you a little bit out of the Meet the Good People book, which is what we're using as our sort of format, our frame for these sermons during Lent. And Roger Ross, who's the author here, pulls this little excerpt out of John Wesley's journal right after the 1st of April, after he had witnessed George Whitefield do this thing with all these coal miners in Bristol. Wesley writes, "I should have thought the saving of souls almost a sin if it had not been done in a church. That was going to change the next day. On the 2nd of April in 1739, at the age of 35, John Wesley writes these words, "At 4 in the afternoon, I submitted to be more vile, and proclaimed in the highways the glad tidings of salvation, speaking from a little eminence in the ground adjoining to the city to about 3,000 people." Ross identifies that particular moment as a tipping point for not only John Wesley's ministry, but also for the church. Because that was the start of the Methodist movement. That was that moment when Wesley stopped trying to break into the big churches in London and went to where the people were. And there are a ton of stories that go about Wesley going to these little tiny places and all over the countryside in England and preaching to thousands of people who were so hungry for the grace of Christ but did not feel as if they had a connection to the church. And what drove Wesley in this point was because his heart broke for these people. Seeing the churches of England not full of people who were the rank and file of the people of England, his brothers and sisters. And his heart broke for them because the church was not reaching out to them, not going to where they were and connecting with them with the grace of Christ. And in doing that, he was able to finally break through, to be more vile, simply to be more common. to connect with the people that were around him because he cared so deeply for them. He loved each and every one of them. Your heart doesn't break for people you don't love. Something different had to happen. And he found what that was. And in doing that, he found his why, his reason for being, his reason for doing this, his connective tissue that gave him the energy to go out and find every small, little tiny town throughout England and preach the good news of Christ to them. In fact, if you look at a lot of the sort of typical graphics for John Wesley, you'll see a lot of pictures of Wesley and the head face and that sort of thing. But one of the more popular images of John Wesley, he's riding a horse and reading a book because he spent so much time on horseback going from place to place out of that much love for the people of Christ. In fact, I got caught just a little bit ago at the Bismarck church. Somebody asked me, who John Wesley's wife was. I can't tell you. She's just not mentioned that much in the literature and in the literature. His mom is mentioned because she was very foundational in his upbringing. Susanna Wesley is a saint of the church, but I'm going to have to look up what his wife's name was. If anybody can Google that while we're here and let me know, that we appreciate it. Mine's in the car. I think I'm glad. Okay.
Your butt chains.
That was it, Pat. You had your moment. Oh. Wesley's passion deeply connected with his why. The love of the brothers and sisters that he had in Christ. Working on horseback, that common moment, that time. It raises the question, what do we do for those that we love? And who do we love? What is that passion that drives us to sacrifice? You see that passion. Occasionally you'll see it in the mirror for that thing that really energizes you, that person that you can't wait to go serve or meet or be with, that drive to go be with that individual, that person, that group. What is the group that connects with you? You see it in the hands or the hearts and the eyes of nurses who absolutely are committed to the patient that they're serving, even though that patient is having one of their absolute worst days possible. You see it in the hands and hearts and eyes of teachers who come day after day and struggle with students that, quite frankly, are a challenging bunch at times. But you know those teachers that have a real passion for teaching those kids because they love them. They care for them. They cherish them. What's that group for you? Where's your passion? What group do you love? Jesus' mandate in this Great Commission that Bo just read, Jesus calls us to go everywhere. Now the deal is, folks, this is it. We practice that stuff here. We practice loving one another in this place, in this thing that we call church. This is our practice round. But Jesus tells us that this is not where we are to stay. Jesus calls us to go. Don't stay here. The disciples should not stay in their little knot of people telling each other how loved they are and how cherished they are. No, he sent his disciples to the four winds and said, go and preach and teach and baptize in my name. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. You are not going to be left alone, but this is your job. This is your why. Jesus had told them for the last 3 years that they were to love one another and care for one another and cherish each other, and that gave them that reason for going. You're not going to see strangers, you're going to see your brother and sister that you just don't even know their name yet. Go into all the world and teach. The enemies that he calls us to preach to or to reach to in Matthew 5, the outcast, the least of the last and lost that Jesus outlines in the 25th chapter of Matthew. Each of these they've got nothing they can repay you with. That's not why you're there. You're called to be there because you love. And here's the cool thing. Connect with people in mission. Connect with people with your passion. And you will find people that you love desperately. Individuals, ordinary human beings, you'll hear their stories and you'll know their path. You'll know their journey that they've been on. You'll know the struggles that they have been in, and you will fall in love with them all over again. And it strengthens our why. We discover just how large our family truly is. You know, Jesus said that it's easy to love the people that love you, and that's kind of what church is, you know. We're supposed to love the people that love us, and we all kind of know each other, and we're all friends and stuff, and I love you, and I hope you tolerate me, but this is the easy stuff. Don't stay here. To heal and transform the world. You know, this is our mission statement. As the United Methodist Church, our mission is to make new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We don't get to do that in the space of these four walls. We do that out there. Loving others drives us to imagine just what loving others someplace else might be. Imagine new roads and new places and new ways that we can connect with people that we're not connecting with already. New ways that we can be God's church to a hungry and thirsty world. That's when our why gets revealed. And what we do, what you will do, is unique. It's special just to you. Now, it may look like something that somebody else is doing. You know, you may kind of connect with another group that's doing a particular ministry, and that's fine. You know, connect with the food pantry, connect with volunteering with the schools, connect with all of these things. But doing that means that you're connecting with your passion. It's not your job to save the entire world, but it's certainly your job to get out there and save the ones that you can. So when we ask where we should go, our ability to serve, not just our talent, not just the way that we can, the skills that we have as a nurse or a teacher or a doctor or whatever. Our ability to serve is not just that, it includes the people that we have a passion to help, the people that we have a passion to go, because that's why we are there. We love that bunch. Our ability to serve, when we connect with that group, means that our ability to serve is connected with the needs, the world's need to receive. And at that intersection is our point of service. That is that hillside that you are being called to, just as John Wesley was called to that little knoll outside of Bristol in England. Just like every nurse is called to be at the bedside of a sick person, just like every teacher is called to be in the classroom on Monday morning, just like every helper in every profession is being asked to go and be healing and hope and grace. What we are called as Christians, what our specific duty is, what our specific grace and blessing is that we are called to be Christ. Christ's hand and heart and emissary and voice and hope to a world that needs that. Where you go is driven by who you can't wait to love. So I'll leave you with just this one question. Who's waiting to be loved by you? Healed by you? Comforted by you? Who's waiting to be loved by this church? connected with by this church, reached out to by this church. Who's waiting? Go into all the world and preach and teach and baptize. And Jesus will be with you even to the end of the age. Let's bow our heads. Lord, sometimes we fear leaving this place. We're afraid we'll be rejected. We're afraid that they won't like our message or even like us. And we let that fear root our feet in the carpet of this place. Lord, you have promised to be with us every step of the way. With that courage and that grace and that hope, Lord, take us from this place into yours, and may we finally meet those that you have called us to reach to. And we ask this in your Son's name.